He dragged her from the burning wagon, her breath shallow, eyes wild. "Easy now," he said, pressing his coat over her shoulders. "You're safe." She looked up, defiant even through the smoke. "Safe with you." His gaze held steady, safer than out here. The wind howled, carrying the sound of hoofbeats closing in. He tightened his grip on the reins, voice low. "Ride with me. You'll sleep in my bed tonight if we make it that far." The storm had already erased his tracks by the time Daniel reached the ridge. Wind screamed through the canyons, carrying the smell of iron and smoke, the scent of a fight gone bad. His horse stumbled beneath him, flanks slick with frost. He should have turned back hours ago before the mountains swallowed the sun, but something in his gut, some old stubborn instinct, refused to yield. He spotted the figure near a shattered pine, small and motionless, wrapped in torn buckskin darkened by blood. For a heartbeat, he thought it was just another casualty of the border wars. Then she moved, barely but enough. Daniel slid from the saddle, boots crunching through ice. Up close, she was young, maybe 20, and her wrists were bound with rawhide. Apache, from her braids and the painted beads still tangled in them. Her lips were blue, her breathing shallow. He hesitated. Bringing her into camp could mean trouble, reprisal, questions he couldn't afford to answer. But leaving her, that wasn't a choice he could live with. "Easy," he muttered, cutting the bindings with his knife. Her eyes flickered open, dark as storm glass. They fixed on his badge, half hidden beneath his coat. "You're cavalry," she rasped. "Was," he said. "Not anymore." She tried to pull away, even half-conscious. "Then why save me?" Daniel looked at her for a long second, snow thickening between them. "Because no one else would." He lifted her gently into the saddle and walked beside the horse through the rising wind. Each step sank deep, the cold biting through his coat. She drifted in and out, whispering words in Apache he didn't understand. Once, her hand clutched his sleeve. Whether from fear or defiance, he couldn't tell. By the time the cabin came into view, a lonely shack against the blinding white, Daniel's legs were numb. He kicked the door open, carried her inside, and laid her near the hearth. She stirred, murmuring something that sounded like a warning. Outside, wolves howled. Inside, silence pressed close. Daniel poured a tin cup of water, watching her face in the firelight. "Rest," he said softly. Her eyes met his again, sharp even through exhaustion. "You'll regret this, Cowboy." Maybe she was right, but for tonight she'd sleep in his bed alive. The cabin's door groaned shut against the wind, muting the storm to a low, restless hum. Daniel knelt by the fire, feeding it small pieces of cedar until the flames caught and the room filled with flickering warmth. He could finally see her properly now, the Apache woman he'd pulled out of the snow. Her skin was pale from cold, her lips cracked, but her eyes still burned with the kind of defiance that didn't die easy. He tossed another log into the fire and straightened. "You're half frozen," he said. "If I don't warm you, you won't make it till dawn." Her voice was little more than a rasp. "I didn't ask to be saved," he half smiled, pulling a blanket from the cot. "Yeah, you did, just didn't use words." When he laid the blanket across her, she flinched. He paused, didn't touch her again. "You can stay mad," he said, "long as you stay alive." Outside, the wind howled, shaking the shutters. Inside, the only light came from the fire licking across her face. She watched him move about the room, checking his rifle, unlacing his coat, setting a kettle over the flames. Every motion was deliberate, unhurried, as though he were trying to keep the world from collapsing by the rhythm of his hands. "You live here?" she asked finally. "For now." She studied the shelves, the small cot, the single photograph on the wall, an old cavalry unit, uniforms crisp, smiles uncertain. "Soldier's cabin." "Used to be," he said quietly. "You desert." He looked up from the kettle. "Depends who you ask." Silence filled the space between them. The fire popped. Snow fell heavier against the roof. After a while, she tried to sit up. He was beside her in an instant, steadying her with one hand. "Easy!" She winced. "The arrow!" He checked the bandage at her side, wrapped hastily on the trail. Blood had soaked through. "You'll need whiskey for this," he said, reaching for a bottle. Her hand caught his wrist. No drink. You want the pain. She met his gaze. Pain means, I'm still here. He held her eyes a second longer, then nodded. Suit yourself. When he peeled the bandage away, she didn't cry out, just clenched her teeth and stared at the fire until the color returned to her face. He cleaned the wound, wrapped it again, slower this time, his hands careful but firm. When he finished, she exhaled and sank back against the blanket. You treat all your prisoners this kind. You ain't my prisoner. Then what am I? He hesitated, then said, someone who deserved better luck. Her eyes softened, just barely, but before she could reply, a sound cut through the wind, a faint, metallic clatter. Daniel froze. That wasn't the storm. He rose, rifle in hand, stepping to the window. Through the cracks in the shutter, he saw movement, shadows crossing the ridge, torches flickering against the snow. How many? She whispered. 3, maybe 4. Soldiers? He shook his head. Bounty riders. They'll be looking for someone worth money, or someone worth killing. She pulled herself upright, face pale but alert. They followed your trail. No, he said grimly. They followed yours. He crossed the room, snuffed the lantern, and motioned for silence. The fire still glowed, but dimmer now, just enough to show the line of his jaw, the steel in his eyes. They can't see smoke, he said, but if they circle closer they'll smell the horses. Her voice was calm. Then we fight. He turned to her. You can't stand. Then you fight. He gave a half laugh that didn't reach his eyes. Ain't much of a plan, but it'll do. Outside, the crunch of boots on snow grew clearer. One voice muttered, another laughed, a sound sharp enough to chill the blood. Daniel moved to the door, cocking the rifle. He glanced back once. Stay low, don't make a sound. She nodded, gripping the edge of the blanket like a weapon she didn't have. The first torch passed the window, glow sweeping across the walls. A man's shadow paused, head turning toward the cabin. Then, silence. Daniel's finger tightened on the trigger. The handle creaked. The door began to open. And from behind him, in a whisper that barely touched the air, she said, If you live through this, Cowboy, I'll tell you why they wanted me dead. The words hit harder than the wind outside. The door swung wider. Light spilled in. He drew a breath, steady, unflinching. Guess I'll make sure I do. The first man through the door didn't even have time to see. Daniel fired once, clean, center chest, and the sound cracked through the cabin like thunder. The man hit the floor hard, his torch tumbling out into the snow. 2 more shadows moved outside, shouting, Narlin. He still didn't know her name, but he'd learn it later, dragged herself across the floor, reaching for the rifle he'd laid by the hearth. He glanced back, shaking his head. Stay down. I can shoot, she hissed. I believe you. That's why I want you alive. The next shot came through the window, splintering wood and scattering embers. Daniel ducked, grabbed his hat and rolled toward the door. He fired twice, then once more for the echo. The silence afterward was worse than the gunfire. When he finally looked outside, one rider was down in the snow. The others had scattered into the trees, leaving their dead behind. He exhaled slow, lowering the rifle. Won't be back tonight, he said, voice hoarse. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes were fixed on the man at the door, the way his blood darkened the floorboards, the steam rising from his coat. You kill easy, she said. Daniel reloaded. Only when I have to. And how many times is that? He met her gaze. Too many. He kicked the body out into the snow, dragged the door shut again and barred it. The storm swallowed the sound of death as quick as it had brought it. Inside, the fire burned low. He set his rifle down and leaned against the wall, breathing hard. You need rest, he said. She shook her head. No rest with killers close. He almost smiled. Then you'll fit right in. She studied him, eyes narrowing. You're not bounty, not soldier. So what are you? Just a man trying not to be one. She frowned, not understanding. That don't make sense. It will, he said quietly, once you start counting ghosts. For a while, neither spoke. The wind howled, the fire hissed, the blood on the floor steamed and vanished. Finally, she said, "They weren't bounty riders." He looked up. "You sure?" "They ride for men who trade breath for gold. They don't hunt for coin, they hunt for silence." He crouched in front of her. "Then what did you do to make them come?" Her eyes flickered. "I lived." He didn't press. Something in her tone told him the story wasn't finished. He turned back to the fire, pulled his coat off and threw another log on. "You'll dry faster by the bed," he said. "Floor's too cold." "I'll manage." "You'll freeze." She stared at him a long moment before answering. "You always argue this much with strangers." He smiled faintly. "Only with the ones who scare me." That earned a small, unexpected laugh, short, sharp, and gone too fast to be joy. She pulled herself to her feet, swaying once before steadying against the wall. He reached out a hand but stopped before touching her. She didn't need help. She just needed space. When she reached the bed, she sank onto it slowly, one hand pressed to her side. "You got a name?" she asked. "Daniel," he said. "Used to mean something." She nodded. "And mine." "You tell me." She hesitated. Then, "Nalin." He repeated it softly, testing the sound. "Nalin." "What's it mean?" "Water." He glanced toward the window where snow piled high against the glass. "Seems we could use some of that." She managed a faint smile, but her eyes were heavy now. He could see exhaustion dragging her under, even as she tried to fight it. "You sleep," he said. "I'll keep watch." She shook her head. "No one keeps watch forever." "Maybe not, but I can manage one night." Her eyes softened again, just a little. "Then you'll need your gun close." "It's closer than my breath." For a moment, her gaze lingered on him, searching, cautious, almost tender. Then her eyelids fluttered shut. Daniel stood there a long while, watching the firelight dance across her face. Outside, the storm began to ease, leaving only the whisper of wind and the creak of old wood. When he finally sat down beside the fire, his rifle across his knees, he realized something unsettling. He wasn't thinking about the men outside anymore. He was thinking about her. And in a land where trust could get you killed faster than a bullet, that thought scared him worse than any gunfight ever could. By dawn, the storm had moved on, leaving behind a quiet too clean, too empty. The snow outside shimmered pale gold under the early light. Inside, the cabin smelled of smoke, iron, and something new, the faint trace of warmth from two people who hadn't died in the night. Daniel stirred first. He rose from the chair by the fire, his joints stiff, his hat tipped low to keep the embers glow from his eyes. He glanced toward the bed. Nalin was awake, lying still, but awake. Her hand rested on her wound, her gaze steady on him. "You didn't sleep," she said. He shook his head. "Didn't trust the quiet." "Good," she murmured. "Quiet lies." He poured water into a cup and held it out. "You'll need this." She hesitated before taking it, her fingers brushing his for a moment too long. "You watch over all your rescues this close?" He smiled faintly. "Only the ones who might stab me when I'm not looking." Her lips curved just slightly, a ghost of amusement. "Then you know me well enough already." They sat in the soft hush of morning for a while. Outside, the snow dripped from the eaves, slow and steady. The world was thawing. Daniel reached for his coat and rifle. "I'll fetch the horses. We move when you can ride." She frowned. "You'd take me back to town?" "No." He glanced at her. "Town won't take kindly to what you are. We'll ride south, River Way. There's a pass there. Quieter trail." Her eyes narrowed. "Why risk it?" "Because men like the ones last night don't stop hunting till the ground's got a body to show for it. And if they come again?" He checked the rifle, slid it into the holster. "Then I shoot straighter." When he opened the door, light poured in, soft, golden, almost gentle. He paused, looking out across the snow. "World looks peaceful," he said. "Almost makes a man forget it ain't." She turned her head toward him. "You forget easy. Not since I started remembering wrong." He left her with the fire and stepped into the cold. The air bit at his skin, but the stillness was welcome. The horses were half buried near the pines, steam rising from their nostrils. As he brushed snow from the saddle, he noticed something strange, hoofprints leading away from the ridge. Not his, not hers. Someone had been there, after the fight, after the storm. He crouched low, tracing the print. Too deep for the wind to have left. A single rider, moving light, fast, heading east. When he came back inside, Nalin was sitting up, braiding her hair with slow, careful movements. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said. "Maybe I have." He poured himself a cup of coffee, the kind that burned more than it comforted. "Someone came after we slept." Her hands stilled. "How many?" "One." She nodded slowly. "Then he'll bring more." Daniel studied her face. "You know who it is." Her silence was answer enough. Finally she said, "He's called Crane, white trader, pays men to steal what the desert don't offer. Land, gold, people." Daniel leaned against the wall. "And you?" Her gaze was distant now, her voice low. "He took from my village, my sister. I followed him. I burned what I found." He nodded once. Slow. "And now he wants what he lost." Her jaw tightened. "He'll find me dead first." Daniel looked at her. This woman who'd faced fire, cold, and men worse than either, and felt something shift inside him. It wasn't pity. It wasn't fear. It was something he hadn't felt in years, respect that came with the weight of choice. He tossed his coat across the chair. "Then I reckon we best not make it easy for him." She tilted her head. "You'd stand with me." He gave a faint smile. "I dragged you out of a fire. Figure I'm already halfway damned." A spark flickered in her eyes, small, sharp, dangerous. "You talk too much, cowboy. And you don't talk enough." The moment stretched, fragile as glass. Then she said, "When we ride quiet. Quiet lies," he reminded her, "only if you believe it." He looked toward the window again. The sky was brightening, but the tracks out there weren't fading yet. Something told him the next storm wouldn't be made of wind. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel didn't dread it. The snow had turned to mud by the time they reached the river pass. The thaw came quick, like the land wanted to bury what had happened and start again. But the world doesn't forget that easy. Daniel rode ahead, scanning the ridge for movement. Nalin followed behind, silent but steady, wrapped in his coat. The river ran alongside them, swollen from the melt, a restless and silver ribbon cutting through the valley. By midday, they stopped near a fallen tree to rest the horses. Daniel crouched to refill the canteens, while Nalin gathered brush for a small fire. The silence between them wasn't cold anymore. It was measured, careful, alive. "You've been here before," she said finally, watching the way his eyes moved over the land. He nodded. "Years back." "Cavalry patrol." She paused, then asked, "You kill Apache then too?" The question cut clean. He didn't look up. "Wasn't a choice they gave me." "And now?" He glanced at her. "Now I make my own." She studied him for a long beat, then tossed a handful of dry grass into the fire pit. "Men always say that, until someone tells them not to." He smiled faintly. "You always talk like you're trying to test what a man's made of." She met his gaze. "Only when I don't trust him yet." He nodded once. "Fair enough." The fire caught, smoke curling up into the cold air. They ate what little they had, jerky, a bit of hard bread, the last of the coffee boiled black and bitter. When they were done, Daniel stood. "We'll push through the canyon before sundown. Camp's safer on the other side." Nalin tied her hair back and rose, her side stiff but healing. "How think Crane will follow this far? He's the kind that don't stop till the trail's dry. And the trail ain't dry yet." She gave a short, humorless laugh. "Then maybe I'll stop him myself." Daniel adjusted the saddle cinch, his tone even. "Not while you're half broke, you won't." Her glare was sharp enough to cut through the wind. "I've fought worse with less." He turned to her. "I don't doubt it. But I didn't drag you out of a fire to watch you die in the mud." The words hung between them, too close to something he hadn't meant to say. She looked at him, eyes softening for the briefest second. "And what if I didn't ask you to care?" He met her gaze. "Then I'll do it anyway." The air shifted. The fire hissed. The space between them wasn't empty anymore. It was electric, fragile. Then came the sound. A horse's cry, distant, echoing through the canyon walls. Daniel turned sharply. "Pack it up," he said. She grabbed her rifle. You said we had time. Looks like I was wrong. They mounted fast, pushing into the narrow canyon. The walls rose high on both sides, cliffs tight enough to turn sound into traps. The horses' hooves splashed through shallow water as they moved. Behind them, shouts, voices, men. Crane's dogs, Nalin said under her breath. Daniel urged his horse faster. We'll lose 'em through the bend. The canyon narrowed, twisting left then right. Bullets sparked off the rocks. The horses snorted and stumbled. Daniel fired blind behind them, the sound of gunfire echoing tenfold in the stone corridor. Nalin turned in the saddle, returning fire with calm precision. One shot, clean, measured, sent a rider tumbling into the river. Good shooting, Daniel called over the wind. She didn't answer. Another shot cracked, grazing her arm. She gritted her teeth but kept her seat. Hold on, he shouted. Up ahead, the canyon opened suddenly into a drop. The river spilled over a short ledge into a basin below. Daniel yanked the reins hard. His horse reared, skidding in the mud. Nalin's horse lost footing and went down. She hit the ground with a cry, rolling near the edge. Damn it! Daniel jumped down, sprinting toward her as bullets struck the rocks around them. He grabbed her arm, hauling her upright. Can you stand? She nodded, breath ragged. Go! He shoved her ahead, returning fire. Two riders closed in from the bend. The echo of hooves thundered like drums of war. Daniel fired again. One man fell. The other turned tail, retreating into the canyon. Silence fell, thick and sudden. The last echo of gunfire drifted away. He turned back to Nalin. She was bleeding again, shoulder this time, but standing, rifle still in hand. Still think you don't need me? He asked. She glared at him through the pain. You talk too much. He almost smiled. Yeah, I get that a lot. They stood side by side, breath steaming in the cold, watching the canyon mouth for movement. Nothing came. Finally, he said, We'll camp here tonight. Nalin nodded, eyes still on the bend. If they come back? He chambered another round, voice low and certain. Then they'll wish they hadn't. The wind swept through the canyon again, carrying dust, blood, and the faint smell of smoke. Not from the fire behind them, but from the one still waiting ahead. Night fell heavy over the canyon, thick with mist and river scent. Daniel built a small fire against the rock wall, the flame no bigger than his palm, enough for warmth, not enough to be seen. The water nearby whispered low, carrying bits of moonlight on its current. Nalin sat a few paces away, shoulder-wrapped in a strip of his shirt. Her face was pale, but her hands were steady as she tied the bandage tight. She hadn't made a sound since they'd stopped. Daniel tossed another twig into the fire, then spoke softly. You did good back there. She didn't look up. Didn't stop them, though. Didn't die either. She smirked faintly, the corner of her mouth twitching. Not yet. He studied her in the firelight, how the shadows played across her features, how her eyes caught every flicker. You ought to rest that arm. I'll rest when he's gone. Crane? She nodded once. You said it yourself. He don't stop. Daniel leaned back against the rock, stretching his legs. You make enemies easy. Her gaze lifted, calm, sharp. No. I just don't serve 'em. The wind moved through the canyon, carrying the faint call of an owl somewhere in the distance. For a while, that was the only sound. Then she said, You still haven't asked why he took me. He met her eyes. Didn't figure you'd tell me yet. I won't, she said simply. But you should know what you're riding into. I already do. Do you? She leaned forward, voice low. He's not after revenge, Daniel. He's after silence. I know things he sold. Women, children, Apache, Mexicans, even whites too poor to matter. He trades them like cattle. Daniel's jaw tightened. That's a noose crime. She looked at the fire. And who you think built the gallows? The words hit hard. He had no answer. The wind carried the truth away before he could find one. After a while, she whispered, I tried to burn his camp. Freed who I could. He took my sister to find me. Daniel's voice dropped. Who you think she's still alive? Her hands clenched in her lap. I can't think anything else. The fire popped, throwing sparks between them. He said quietly, Then we find her. Her eyes flashed up. You think it's that simple? No, he said, but simple ain't what I'm good at. for the first time since he'd met her. She laughed, not mocking, not bitter. A sound like something half forgotten. It faded quick, replaced by a quiet that wasn't cold this time. She reached for the flask beside him. He handed it over without a word. She took a sip, coughed, and handed it back. "That's terrible," he grinned. "That's survival." Their eyes met over the flame, steady, unflinching. Then she asked, "You got anyone?" He frowned. "What kind of anyone?" "Someone waitin'." He stared into the fire. "Used to." "What happened?" He gave a small shrug. "Same thing that happens to anyone who waits too long. Time left and I didn't follow." She looked at him a long moment. "You talk like a man buried under his own shadow." He smiled without humor. "And you talk like someone who digs for the bones." The wind shifted. She shivered slightly, though the fire burned steady. He noticed. Without a word, he stood and shrugged off his coat. She opened her mouth to protest, but he stopped her with a look. "You'll freeze before you heal." "I don't take charity." "It ain't charity," he said, draping it gently over her shoulders. "It's common sense." She pulled it close despite herself. "You always this kind?" "No," he said quietly. "Only when it costs me." Something flickered in her eyes then, something he couldn't name. She turned toward the river, staring into the darkness as if it might answer for her. "Sleep," he said softly. "We ride early." She didn't move. "And if he finds us before morning?" Daniel rested his hand on the rifle beside him. "Then we stop running." The night deepened. The river whispered. Somewhere beyond the cliffs, a wolf howled once, long and low. When Nalin finally closed her eyes, Daniel watched the fire burn down to coals. He told himself he was keeping watch, same as always. But when her breathing steadied, and the first light touched the canyon wall, he realized the truth. He wasn't protecting her out of duty anymore. He was protecting her because losing her now would break something he didn't even know was left. The first light crept down the canyon walls, turning the water to molten gold. Daniel was already awake, crouched near the river, washing the blood from his hands. The night had left him heavy-eyed, but alert. Every sound, the river's whisper, the snap of twigs, the faint rasp of leather, cut clear in the cold. Behind him, Nalin stirred. "You don't sleep much," she murmured. He didn't turn. "Sleep's a habit I broke years ago." She sat up slowly, pulling his coat tighter around her. "You break all your habits? Just the ones that kept me alive?" She smiled faintly. "That's a poor trade." He stood, wiping his hands on his trousers, and looked toward the trail ahead. The canyon narrowed again up north, rough country, the kind that turned men around if they didn't know how to read it. "We'll head south another mile, then cut through the rocks. Crane won't risk crossing the river this early. Too slick." Nalin rose, wincing but hiding it well. "You sound sure." "I ain't. I just talk like I am." She gave him a look that could have been amusement or warning. "Then you better start praying you're right, cowboy." They saddled the horses in silence. The air smelled of thawing earth and cedar. For a few moments, it almost felt like the world had forgotten them. Almost. Halfway down the canyon, Daniel noticed it. The sound of a horse stumbling over rock, too far to see but too close to ignore. He raised a hand, motioning for quiet. Nalin froze, her fingers tightening on the reins. "Tracks," he said, low, fresh. "How fresh?" He crouched, touching the mud. The print still glistened. "An hour, maybe less." She scanned the ridgeline. "Crane. Or his dogs." They remounted fast, moving along the riverbank, hooves muffled in the wet soil. The canyon walls closed tighter now, pressing sound into echoes. Daniel's jaw set hard. He didn't like tight spaces, never had, not since the war. Suddenly, the crack of a rifle split the air. A bullet hit the rock beside him, spraying dust across his face. "Down!" he shouted. Nalin swung off her horse, rolling behind a boulder. Another shot whined past. Daniel dropped beside her, breathing hard. "2 shooters, ridgeline," he said. She steadied her rifle. "Then we take 'em fast." He looked at her. "You're bleeding," and they got high ground. "Then we shoot faster." He almost grinned, despite the chaos. You don't scare easy, do you? I was born scared. Just learn to use it. The next shot came closer. Daniel fired back quick and clean. A cry echoed across the canyon, one down. The second rifle fell silent. They waited, still as stone. Then, a voice, rough and low, carried on the wind. Daniel Maddox, you got something belongs to me. Crane. The name hung in the canyon like smoke. Daniel's jaw clenched. You hear that? He murmured. Narlin's eyes darkened. I hear him. You ever seen him? Once, she said. He was smiling. Daniel peered up the ridge. He ain't smiling now. They climbed fast, taking the slope in silence, boots sliding on loose gravel. The higher they got, the clearer the tracks became. 3 horses, 1 left behind. At the top, the land flattened into a plateau. The wind hit hard, cold and dry. Then they saw him. Crane stood beside his horse, coat flapping, rifle resting against his shoulder. 2 men flanked him, both rough, both armed. His face was clean-shaven, but his eyes were the color of uncut steel, sharp, empty, unforgiving. Well, hell, Crane called. Didn't think you'd drag her this far, Maddox. Daniel stepped forward, rifle leveled. You should have stayed gone, Crane chuckled. Ain't how business works, son. Girl's worth more than your conscience. Nalin's voice cut through the wind. You still trade people, Crane, or just the ones you can't break? Crane grinned. Still got that tongue, I see. I'll fix that once you're back where you belong. Daniel shifted slightly, blocking her with his body. She ain't going anywhere. Crane's smile vanished. Then you just picked the wrong side of the rope. The standoff stretched thin. 3 rifles, 3 breaths. Then the wind turned, and Crane's eyes flicked to Nalin's shoulder, to the blood-stained bandage peeking from beneath Daniel's coat. That wound's fresh, he said. She'll slow you down. Give her to me and I'll let you walk. Daniel's reply came quiet, steady. You ain't got enough men for that trade. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then Crane raised his hand, and the world erupted in gunfire. Daniel dove left, dragging Nalin with him. Bullets tore through dust and stone. The horses bolted, screaming. Nalin fired once, dropping one of Crane's men. Daniel's second shot caught the other in the leg. When the smoke cleared, Crane was gone, his horse pounding away into the distance. Daniel cursed under his breath. He'll circle back. Nalin's face was pale, her arm trembling. He'll bring more. He nodded grimly. Then we ride now. They mounted the remaining horses, blood and dust mixing on their coats. As they vanished into the southern ridge, the canyon behind them echoed with Crane's voice. Soft, furious, certain. I can't hide her forever, Maddox. Daniel didn't look back. Ain't planning to. The wind carried their silhouettes into the red dawn, 2 fugitives riding toward a promise neither yet trusted, chased by the kind of man who'd burn the world to claim what he'd lost. By noon the sun was high and merciless, turning the canyon dust into fire. Daniel and Nalin rode hard, pushing the horses until the air shimmered with heat. The land opened wide ahead, flat desert, endless horizon, no shade but what you made for yourself. They hadn't spoken since the shootout. The silence between them had changed. It wasn't cautious anymore. It was heavy, like a truth neither wanted to name. When they finally stopped near a dry riverbed, Daniel slid off his horse and pulled the canteen from his saddlebag. He shook it. A few drops. Maybe enough for one of them. He handed it over. Drink. She took it but didn't move. You first. He met her eyes. Ain't askin'. And I ain't obeyin', she said, voice sharp. He sighed, wiped sweat from his brow, and took a small sip before passing it back. She watched him, then drank. Slow, careful. You ever been through this stretch? She asked. He nodded. Once. On patrol. Back when I wore the uniform. Before you started making your own choices. He gave a wry grin. Guess I didn't learn quick enough. The wind picked up, carrying dust that stung the eyes. Nalin turned away, her braid whipping against her back. We can't outrun him, she said. He'll track the horses easy. Then we stop running, Daniel said quietly. Pick our ground and stand. She looked at him. You mean fight? Not yet. Not till we got a chance. Her tone hardened. And if there ain't one, then we make one. She stared at him, studying the man behind the calm. "You talk like someone waiting to die." He didn't answer. Instead, he crouched near the dirt, tracing faint lines in the sand. The trail behind them was clear. Crane would see it before dusk. When he stood again, his face was set. "We head west. There's a dry gulch past those rocks, narrow, hidden. We can hole up there for a day." She nodded, but her voice dropped. "And after that?" He didn't look at her. "We keep moving." As they rode again, the silence returned, thicker now. Nalin's eyes stayed on the horizon, but her mind was somewhere else. When the gulch appeared, a shallow scar in the earth, they dismounted and led the horses inside. The air was cooler here, the walls high enough to hide them. Daniel tied the reins to a root and dropped his hat, wiping the grime from his face. "We'll rest till dark." Nalin leaned against the wall, breath shallow. "You keep looking behind us." "Habit." She tilted her head. "Or guilt." He frowned. "You think I feel guilty?" "I think you've killed enough men to start wondering if they deserved it." He froze. "You don't hold back, do you?" "Would you rather I lie?" "No," he said quietly. "You just got good aim." Her tone softened. "So do you." For a while, the only sound was wind sifting through stone. Then she asked, "Why'd you leave the cavalry?" Daniel hesitated. "They told me to burn a camp. Said it was Apache raiders." "And?" He stared at the sand. "It was families, women, kids." Her face changed, something fierce, then something fragile. "You stayed?" "No," he said, "but I didn't stop it neither." Nalin stepped closer. "You saved me. That's stopping something." He shook his head. "Doesn't balance the scale." She reached out, touched his arm lightly. "Maybe not, but it changes the weight." He looked at her, and for a moment the desert vanished, just her eyes, dark and endless as the canyon at night. Then the horses startled, a sound from above, small, metallic, deliberate. Daniel grabbed his rifle, motioning her down. A bullet struck the wall beside them, spraying grit. "Down!" he shouted. They dove behind a boulder as another shot echoed. "Crane," she whispered. "Or someone paid enough to find us." He crawled up the wall's edge, peering out. A single rider, scout maybe, was circling the ridge, glassing the gulch with a scope. Daniel cursed softly. "We're boxed in." Nalin loaded her rifle, eyes sharp. "Then we break out." "Not yet," he said. "If he don't see us move, he'll think we're gone." She nodded, lying still beside him. Dust drifted through the air, catching the sun like smoke. Minutes passed. The rider dismounted, scanning the ground below. Daniel's grip tightened on his rifle. "Now," she whispered. He didn't answer, just exhaled, aimed, and fired. The echo rolled across the canyon. The rider crumpled. Silence again. Nalin looked at him, expression unreadable. "You never miss, do you? Only when it counts." He climbed back down, eyes scanning the ridge. That one wasn't Crane, just his eyes. She stood slowly, pressing her wounded shoulder. "Then the eyes are closed. For now." He nodded. "For now." The wind rose, carrying sand across the desert. Somewhere in that shifting haze, the next choice waited. The kind that wouldn't end with bullets, but with trust. The wind calmed by nightfall, leaving the desert quiet as a held breath. Daniel sat by a small fire tucked into the shadow of the gulch wall, feeding it bits of dried sagebrush. The smoke rose thin and straight, lost quick in the darkness. For the first time in days, there was no echo of pursuit. Nalin slept a few feet away, wrapped in his blanket, her breathing slow, her face half hidden beneath her hair. She looked almost at peace. Almost. He watched her a long while, rifle across his knees, eyes tracing the faint scars along her wrist. The marks of rope, of capture, of survival. He'd seen men with less reason give up long before she ever would. When the fire burned low, he leaned back, gaze turned skyward. The stars stretched wide over the canyon, cold, endless, untouched. He wondered if anyone up there ever looked down and saw the mess men made trying to live. He must have dozed for a while, because when he woke, the fire had gone out, and Nalin was gone. Daniel sat up fast, scanning the shadows. Her rifle was gone too. He swore under his breath and grabbed his hat. The horses were still there, tired and restless, ears twitching at the wind. No signs of a struggle, no blood, no tracks, until he looked closer. Bare footprints led toward the ridge. He followed. The moon hung low, lighting the rocks just enough to make out her shape ahead. A small Kaka's steady silhouette moving uphill. She wasn't running. She was leaving. Daniel's voice cut through the still air. "You got a reason for sneaking off in the dark." She stopped but didn't turn. "You shouldn't have followed." "Well, I ain't real good at should-haves." Her shoulders stiffened. "Crane's not far. I heard riders on the wind. Then you're walking straight to 'em." She turned then, face pale in the moonlight. "I'm the one he wants, not you. If I go, he stops hunting you." He stepped closer, jaw tightening. "You think that's how men like him work? He don't stop till he's taken everything that made you worth the trouble. Maybe that's all I've got left to trade." He stared at her, the anger coming quiet deep. "You don't get to decide who dies worth what." Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't. "You don't understand. My sister's alive. I heard her name when they rode past. They have her. If I go, maybe they let her go." Daniel exhaled hard, looking down at the sand. "You really believe that? I have to." He shook his head. "You'll just give him 2 prisoners instead of 1. Her voice rose. "You don't know him." "I know his kind." Something in his tone made her flinch. For a long moment, neither spoke. "Finally," she said quietly, "you can't save everyone, Daniel." He looked up, eyes catching the silver light. "I ain't trying to save everyone. Just you." The words hung there, heavier than any threat. She took a step back, her jaw tight. "You shouldn't have said that." "Why?" "Because now I can't go." He took another step forward. "Then don't." The silence that followed was sharp as a knife edge. She finally looked away, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "You're a fool, you know that." "Wouldn't be the first time." She laughed once, bitter, broken. "Men like you die for women like me, and the world don't even blink." He smiled faintly. "Then we'll make it blink." She looked at him long enough for the words to mean something, then nodded. "If we ride before sunrise, we can make the ridge." He studied her face. "You sure you still trust me?" She hesitated. "I don't, but I trust what you'll do." He nodded slowly. "That's close enough." When they returned to camp, dawn was already bleeding into the sky. Daniel rebuilt the fire in silence while she checked her rifle. The rhythm between them had changed again. Warmer, maybe, but fragile as glass. As the first light spilled into the gulch, Daniel said, "We'll ride west through the flats. There's an old mining town a day out. Might be shelter." Nalin nodded, tightening the strap across her shoulder. "And if he's waiting there, then we stop running for good." She met his eyes. "You always this sure about dying?" He grinned faintly. "No, Mom. Just sure about not running." For the first time, she smiled back, small, real. Then she mounted up, and they rode into the sunrise, side by side. Behind them, at the edge of the gulch, a glint of metal caught the light. Crane's spyglass, half buried in the sand, pointed west. He was already watching. The mining town rose from the desert like a skeleton, timbers gray and brittle, glass long gone from the windows. Wind whistled through the empty saloon doors, and somewhere a sign creaked with each breath of the sun. Daniel led the horses down the main street, eyes scanning each building. "No fresh tracks," he said quietly. "We've got time." Nalin dismounted stiffly, her boots crunching over the dust. "You sure this place is dead?" He gave a dry smile. "Only kind of town that still welcomes me." They moved through the broken porch of what used to be the general store. Inside the shelves were bare but for a few rusted tins and a forgotten Bible missing half its pages. Daniel brushed the counter with his glove, leaving lines in the dust. "Perfect," he said. "We'll hold here tonight." Nalin frowned. "Walls this thin won't stop bullets." "Maybe not, but they'll stop the wind." He unsaddled the horses, set the rifles within reach, and found a small barrel to light for heat. The flame came weak at first, then steady. For the first time in days, the space felt still, too still. As night fell, they ate in silence. The wind outside carried faint echoes, metal clinking, something shifting far down the street. Nalin's eyes narrowed. You hear that? Daniel nodded. Wind, maybe. She shook her head. No, men don't let the wind carry their breath that heavy. He set his tin aside. Then we're not alone. He moved to the window, peeking through the cracks. Across the street, the saloon doors swayed once and twice, then stilled. Crane, Nalin whispered. Not yet, Daniel said. Scouts first. How many? Can't tell. 2 at least. He turned back to her, voice low. Pack the rifles. If they see us here, they'll call the others. But she wasn't moving. Her face had gone pale, and he saw why. She'd found a mark carved into the doorframe, 3 crude lines crossing in a circle. What is it? He asked. Her hand trembled slightly as she traced the carving. Crane's mark. He's been here before. Daniel swore under his breath. Then we're sittin' in his damn parlor. She looked at him, fear flickering beneath her anger. We have to leave. He shook his head. We can't, not till dark's full. We'd be open targets. Her voice broke through the whisper. You don't understand. He leaves that mark for his men. It means the place is safe for them. Then it ain't safe for us, he said grimly. A noise from outside, a boot scraping gravel. Then another. Daniel grabbed his rifle. Stay behind me. But she was already moving. Before he could stop her, Nalin slipped through the back door and vanished into the alley. Nalin! No answer. He cursed, darting after her, but she was gone into the dark. The air outside was colder now, sharp with the scent of gun oil and sand. Daniel moved along the wall, every nerve alive. Somewhere down the street, a voice murmured. A man's, low and mocking. Don't bother hiding, girl. You always did run in circles. Crane. Daniel felt the sound before he saw him, emerging from the dark like a ghost in dusted leather, rifle slung across his back. 2 of his men flanked him, one with a lantern swinging low, and in front of them, Nalin, her hands bound, a revolver pressed to her side. Evening, Maddox, Crane drawled. Knew you'd bring her somewhere quiet. You always did like tidy ends. Daniel's voice came steady. Let her go. Crane smiled thin. She's mine to collect. Always was. Nalin's eyes met Daniel's, defiant, desperate. Don't! Daniel shifted the rifle higher. You so sure you can shoot before I do? Crane chuckled. I don't need to. Girl's worth more alive. Not to me, Daniel said, and fired. The shot hit the lantern. It exploded in flame, smoke filling the street. Chaos erupted. Crane's men scattered as Daniel ran forward. Nalin dropped low, kicking one of the men behind the knees. Daniel caught the other with a clean strike of the rifle butt. Crane fired wild through the smoke, his bullet grazing Daniel's arm. You think you can take her from me? He shouted. Daniel's reply came like gravel. I already did. The fight was brief, brutal. When the smoke cleared, 2 of Crane's men were down, the fire burning low. But Crane was gone again, slipping into the shadows like a serpent into the sand. Daniel turned to Nalin. She was shaking, her wrists bleeding where the rope had cut deep. You all right? He asked. She nodded once. He'll come again. I'm counting on it, he said. As they stood in the flickering firelight, the whole town seemed to breathe around them, old ghosts watching new ones being born. And somewhere out in the dark, Crane's voice echoed once more, low and close. You can't save her, Maddox. She'll ruin you before I ever get the chance. Daniel looked toward the sound, jaw set. Guess we'll find out. Dawn broke like a blade. The sky above the dead mining town glowed copper red, and the desert wind carried a smell that wasn't dust. It was smoke. Daniel stood in the saloon doorway, his rifle ready, his arm still bleeding through the bandage. Across the empty street, Nalin was securing the horses, her braid whipping in the wind. The fire Crane's men had started in the night was spreading, slow, deliberate, eating its way down the row of shacks like the town itself was trying to erase them. We can't stay, Daniel said, stepping into the light. Nalin glanced at the flames licking through the windows. You think he'll let us leave? He don't get to let us do anything. She met his eyes, calm, steady. Then you finally learned. He almost smiled, but the sound of hoofbeats silenced them both. From the ridge came the riders, 6 at least. Dust rose behind them, guns glinting in the sunrise, and at their center rode Crane, hat low, coat open, a shadow among men. Daniel stepped into the street, rifle raised. "Get behind cover," he told her. Nalin didn't move. "If you stand alone, he'll kill you first. That's the plan. Not today." She walked out beside him, lifting her rifle. The wind tangled her hair, but her aim was steady. Crane's voice carried across the empty street. "Maddox, ain't you tired of protecting what ain't yours?" Daniel called back. "You talk too much for a man who keeps losing." Crane laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "This ain't losing, son. This is business. The desert just collects its debts." He raised his hand. The riders fanned out, taking cover behind wagons, walls, the half-collapsed stable. The first shot came from the right. Wood splintered beside Daniel's head. He dropped behind the trough, firing back. 2 men fell, one screaming, one silent. Nalin took position at the doorway, reloading fast, every motion clean and certain. She fired once, hitting a man square in the chest. "4 left," she shouted. Daniel nodded. "Make it 2." A bullet grazed his leg. He gritted his teeth, firing again, 1 more down. Then Crane's voice came again, closer now. "You can't win, Maddox. You know that. Give her up, and maybe I'll let you crawl out of here." Daniel looked toward the flames now spreading across the saloon roof. The smoke burned his throat, but his voice came clear. "You keep talking like mercy means something to you." Crane stepped into view, calm amid the chaos. "It does," he said, "when I'm the one selling it." Nalin fired, the shot grazing Crane's shoulder. He didn't flinch, just smiled. "Still got that fight in you," he said. "Guess I'll have to break it myself." The last of his men charged, guns blazing. Daniel dove aside, returning fire. 1 bullet struck home, another tore through his sleeve. When the dust cleared again, only Crane was left standing. He walked slow, rifle in one hand, revolver in the other. "End of the trail, Maddox," he said. "You can't save her, same as you couldn't save those families." Daniel froze. "What did you say?" Crane smiled, cold and deliberate. "You think I don't know your sins? You rode with the men that burned my first camp. You lit the fire that started all this." Nalin's eyes went wide. "He's lying," she whispered. Daniel didn't answer. His silence was answer enough. Crane's grin widened. "See? He remembers." Nalin's rifle trembled. "Tell me it's not true." Daniel's jaw tightened. "It was war orders," her voice cracked. "And now you call this mercy?" Crane raised his revolver. "He ain't got any left, girl. Step aside." She didn't. "No." Daniel lifted his rifle again, though his hands shook now. Not from fear, but from the weight of what was left unsaid. "You talk too much, Crane." The last 2 shots came almost as one. Crane stumbled, a dark bloom spreading across his chest. He fired back, his bullet grazing Nalin's ribs before he fell. The street went still. Smoke curled through the morning light. Daniel dropped to one knee beside her. "You all right?" She nodded weakly. "You could have let him shoot." He shook his head. "You could have let me die." Her eyes softened. "Guess we're both fools." He smiled faintly. "Guess we are." The fire had reached the stables now, heat pressing against them. He helped her onto a horse, then swung up behind her. As they rode out of the burning town, neither looked back. The past had already claimed what it wanted. Behind them, the ghost town burned clean to ash. Ahead, the horizon stretched wide and unbroken, waiting. They rode hard until the sun sat high and cruel above them. By noon, the horses were slick with sweat, the wind hot as breath from an open furnace. The desert stretched on in every direction. No cover, no sound but hooves and the hiss of wind through stone. Nalin's head swayed forward, blood seeping through the bandage at her side. Daniel glanced back every few seconds, one hand steady on the reins, the other gripping her shoulder to keep her upright. "Stay with me," he said. She gave a faint smile. "I'm still here. You won't be if we don't find water soon." Her voice came weak, distant. "You think that's what kills me?" He didn't answer, he just kept riding. By late afternoon, they reached the edge of a dry basin where the ground cracked wide like old leather. Daniel slowed the horses, scanning for shade. There, a bluff ahead, half collapsed, hiding a shallow cave. They dismounted, helping each other to the entrance. Inside it was cool, quiet, alive with the soft whisper of wind through stone. Daniel laid her down against the wall, tearing a strip from his sleeve to reinforce her bandage. "You've lost too much blood," he muttered. She looked up at him, her lips pale but her eyes still sharp. "You've lost more than that." He froze, hand hovering over the wound. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You keep carrying ghosts, Daniel. I can see it in the way you breathe." He sighed, sitting back against the stone beside her. "Maybe. But they're lighter now." "Why?" "'Cause one of 'em finally stopped running." She smiled faintly. "Which one?" He looked at her. "Me." For a long while, neither spoke. The desert outside shimmered gold. The silence wasn't empty. It was thick, full of everything they hadn't said. Finally, she whispered, "Crane was right, wasn't he? About that village." Daniel's hand stilled on his knee. "Yeah, you burned it." He nodded once. "Didn't know who was inside till it was too late." She didn't move, didn't look away. "Then why'd you save me?" He exhaled, slow and heavy. "Because every time I close my eyes, I still see what I didn't stop. I saw you in the snow, and for the first time I could do something different." She stared at him, the anger in her eyes melting into something harder to name. "And that makes you right." "No," he said. "Just means I'm trying to be less wrong." Her voice softened. "That's all any of us can do." He reached for the canteen, shook it, empty. "We'll rest an hour, then ride again." She caught his wrist. "You won't make it if you keep bleeding." He gave a half smile. "You let me worry about that." She frowned, then said, "You're not riding out of this desert alone, Daniel Maddox." He met her gaze, steady. "Wasn't planning to." She blinked, then realized what he meant. "You think we're not making it out?" He didn't reply. Instead, he reached into his saddlebag, pulling out his last bullet, a single round, dull and cold. He rolled it between his fingers. "If he's still out there," he said, "this one's for him. And if he's not, then it's for me." Nalin's voice dropped. "You talk like a man who's already gone." He looked at her, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Maybe I am, but you ain't." Her hand tightened on his arm. "Don't you dare make me watch you die." He smiled faintly. "Wouldn't dream of it." Outside, a vulture circled in the high heat. The wind had shifted, carrying something faint, distant, wrong. Hoofbeats. Nalin heard them too. "He's not dead." Daniel rose slowly, grabbing his rifle. "Didn't figure he'd go down easy." He walked to the mouth of the cave, the desert light spilling over his face. Far out on the horizon, 3 riders moved like ghosts through the glare, one of them dressed in black, riding hard. Crane. Daniel turned back to her. "You ride east when I say, don't look back." She shook her head. "I'm not leaving. This ain't a debate." Her eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. "You saved me to die alone. Then it was all for nothing." He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, something in him broke. He took her hand, pressed it once, hard. "Then don't make it nothing, you live," she whispered. "And you." He smiled. A sad, tired smile that carried every sin he'd ever owned. "I'll buy you the time." Outside, the riders closed in, their silhouettes dark against the sun. Daniel stepped into the light, rifle raised. Behind him, Nalin whispered something in Apache, soft, like prayer. The desert wind carried it away, but the meaning stayed. Go with honor. And when the first gunshot cracked, the sound didn't echo. It just vanished into the endless sky. The desert roared to life as Crane's riders charged through the heat mirage, 3 figures carved from dust and rage. Daniel stood at the cave mouth, boots planted, rifle raised. His shadow stretched long behind him, over the stone where Nalin lay half hidden, watching, waiting. The first shot cracked the silence. Daniel dropped the lead rider before the echo faded. The second circled wide, trying to flank. Daniel turned, fired again, missed. The bullet whined off the rocks, showering sparks. Crane's laughter cut through the wind. "You always did aim for redemption, Maddox. Never could hit it." Daniel moved closer to the light, voice steady. "This time I ain't aiming for me." He fired again. The second rider fell, tumbling into the dust. Crane dismounted, slow and deliberate. his rifle slung over one shoulder, his revolver gleaming. "Still think you can play savior, boy," Crane said. "You think she'll forgive you for what you did?" Daniel reloaded, the metallic click loud in the heat. "Don't matter if she does. Ain't her forgiveness I'm after." "Then what?" Crane stepped closer, his boots crunching. "You want to die clean? There ain't no clean way to die out here." Daniel's rifle came up. "Maybe not, but there's a right way." They fired almost together. Crane's shot hit his shoulder, spun him half around, but Daniel's found its mark. The bullet struck Crane's chest, just below the collarbone. He staggered, one hand clawing at the air, the other trying to lift his gun again. Daniel walked forward, bleeding but unflinching. "You done, Crane." Crane coughed, blood bright on his teeth. "You think killing me changes what you burned?" Daniel stopped a few feet away. "No, but it keeps you from doing it again," Crane smiled, a broken, ugly thing. "You're still the man who lit that fire, Maddox." Daniel's eyes hardened. "Yeah, and you're the man I put it out for." He pulled the trigger one last time. Crane fell back into the dust, the wind already taking him apart, grain by grain. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of the desert breathing. Then Daniel stumbled. His legs gave out. The rifle slipped from his hand. Nalin was at his side in an instant, pressing her hand against the wound in his chest. "No, no, stay with me." He tried to smile, his voice barely a whisper. "Told you, I'd buy the time." "Don't you dare," she said, her voice trembling. "Don't you dare leave me now." He looked at her, and for the first time in years, there was peace in his eyes. "You keep riding. Don't stop till the ground changes color. I'm not leaving you." "You are," he whispered. "You have to." She shook her head, tears cutting through the dust on her cheeks. "You don't get to decide that." He laughed softly, the sound thin, fragile. "You're too stubborn for your own good." "So are you," she said, clutching his hand. The sun climbed higher. The desert shimmered. Daniel's eyes began to fade, the blue of them dulling to gray. "You tell her, your sister. Tell her I'm sorry." Nalin's breath hitched. "You'll tell her yourself." He smiled faintly. "Not where I'm going." His hand went slack. The wind shifted, carrying the sound of his last breath out across the sand. Nalin stayed there for a long while, the sun climbing higher, the silence growing deep. Then, slowly, she closed his eyes, whispering a prayer in Apache, a farewell for warriors and the damned alike. When she stood, the world felt too large, too empty. Crane's body lay still a few paces away, the desert already reclaiming him. She picked up Daniel's hat where it had fallen and set it over his chest. "You were wrong," she murmured. "There was a clean way to die." She saddled the horse, tied the canteen to the horn, and mounted up. For a moment, she looked back. The man who had burned villages and still found a way to save one life. The man who'd died believing he'd made it right. Then she turned her horse east toward the horizon. The wind rose behind her, sweeping across the dunes, erasing the tracks, his, hers, Crane's. By the time the sun reached its peak, there was nothing left but the silence and the scent of gunpowder, fading into heat. And somewhere far away, the faint cry of a hawk cut the sky open, carrying a single truth over the desert. Some debts ain't meant to be paid in gold. Only in blood. By the time the sun reached its zenith, the world had gone silent again. The desert stretched wide and gold around the canyon, the air trembling in the heat. Only one horse rode across that emptiness now, a lone figure, dust rising behind her like smoke from a dying fire. Nalin rode without haste. Her body ached, her side burned, but her eyes never left the horizon. She didn't look back. There was nothing left to look back to. By late afternoon, she found a stream trickling through a shallow ravine. A miracle of water cutting through all that dust. She dismounted, filled her hands, and drank. The taste was metal, bitter, alive. Then she saw it, half buried under the willow roots, a fragment of cloth, blue and torn, the same color as Daniel's old shirt. She picked it up, wrung it dry, and tied it around her wrist. "Now you ride with me," she whispered. She stayed there till the stars rose, listening to the slow rhythm of the stream. The desert, once a place of death, felt almost merciful now. It had taken, yes, but it had also given her a truth no preacher or soldier could ever name. That redemption wasn't something you prayed for. It was something you built, one act of care at a time. When morning came, she rode north, toward the land her people once called home. The mountains ahead glowed faint pink under the dawn, and she thought of her sister, of the faces she still had to find. Weeks later, the settlers who passed through that country told stories. They said a woman rode alone through the high desert, her braid black as storm clouds, her horse moving like shadow. They said she carried a rifle and a name she never spoke, and wherever she stopped, she buried something, sometimes a charm, sometimes a bullet, sometimes a piece of torn blue cloth. They called her the Spirit of the Ridge. But those who met her face to face told it different. They said she was real, quiet, scarred, but with eyes that saw through men like mirrors. She spoke little, worked hard, healed wounds that weren't hers, and every night, when the fire burned low, she'd whisper one line into the flames. He found a way to make peace with what he'd done. Now I'll find mine. One evening, a rider came looking for her, a drifter with a broken arm and an old cavalry patch still pinned to his coat. He carried a note folded tight, said it had been passed from one outpost to another till it reached him. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded, but she knew the handwriting. If this ever finds you, I kept my promise. The fire's out. You keep it that way. There was no name at the bottom. There didn't need to be. Nalin folded the paper, pressed it against her heart, and smiled. Then it's settled, she whispered. No more running. That night, she built a small cairn by the river, a pile of stones topped with a single bullet and his old hatband. Then she rode on, the desert wind carrying the last of the ashes east. The world didn't stop for them. It never would. But somewhere between fire and silence, between sin and mercy, two souls had found their way back to balance, and for the first time, the land itself seemed to breathe easy. If this story stirred something in you, don't let it fade when the screen goes dark. The frontier wasn't just about bullets and vengeance. It was about people trying to live with the weight of their choices, trying to make wrong things right. Every act of care, every quiet mercy, every stand taken when it would have been easier to walk away. Those are the stories worth telling. And if you want to see how redemption rides through every trail we walk, every love we risk, and every silence we break, then stay with us. Because there's another story coming, another man, another promise, another chance to make peace with the past. Hit subscribe, ring that bell, and keep your saddle ready. The next ride's about to begin.